Alright, so this is a dive that I went on when I was working on something else. I was wondering if the dark side was as corruptive as it was so told to be, or if bad people just happen to tend towards the self-focused power of the dark side. And the more I researched it, the less clear the answer to that actually became. Now, you'd imagine this would be quite simple. People throughout the movies reference things such as people being corrupted by the power of the dark side, or the allure of the dark side, drawing them in and darkening their heart. Unfortunately, that's not a great way to judge it, because that does come from the Jedi, who are, well, kind of biased. That's kind of like taking Cruella de Vil's advice on how to best care for your dog's fur. While I'm sure you'd get a very useful answer, I doubt it's exactly what you're looking for in the instance. The Jedi, unfortunately, not being a great source on how to do anything other than simultaneously being hypocritical and pretentious at the same time, I'm going to have to source my information elsewhere. So I decided to check into the movies. The OG trilogy would tend towards dark equals bad, light equals good. But then again, Darth Vader was dark side and could still do the right thing no matter how far gone he was. So clearly, however corruptive it may seem, you can never really change the person. And then you get back to the prequels and you had Mace Windu, who used a style derived from dark side techniques, and Yoda could even manifest lightning. And the whole problem came around because the Jedi were hypocrites and ineffective or complacent in just allowing things to go wrong. Not to mention, even though Anakin did turn to the dark side in the end, he was corrupted as an impressionable teen before he really turned to the dark side of the Force. The corruption came from a person in a position of power over him, enticing him with, well, things that sound nice, and preying on his fears and or insecurities. So we'll set aside our 3-movie series of an elderly religious man taking advantage of a young boy, and we'll move on to the sequel series. The sequels also had a strong light equals good, dark equals bad too. So that's kind of inconsistent with what we've seen in the prequels. But even in that, Kylo was able to turn back from the side of the dark. And yet in the same movies, you also had Rey being drawn into the dark, but somehow not being corrupted by it. So I don't know anymore. The movies aren't giving us a very clear line. So we're going to have to wade into the mud of expanded universe. Well, they don't even agree on how lightsaber crystals work. Some people say their color is predetermined. Some people say a particular color crystal chooses you. I don't know. They're wildly inconsistent throughout the novels. But even in the novels, there was a man who was trained in the dark side. He spent a huge amount of time learning how to become a Sith, and he very much did gain dark side abilities. But after he had finished training that, he decided, well, I'm not really interested in taking over the galaxy or fighting the Jedi, so he just went back to being like the overseer or whatever of a mining operation. He was considered a little bit strict over time, but was overall a nice guy and eventually retired with his wife and children. Not exactly the evil, terrible Sith that he was. He very much did embrace the dark side and only really knew the dark side of the Force, but the dark side has more to do with inward focus than it does anything inherently evil. Yes, inward focus can lead to evil things, but it is not itself evil. You do have to care about yourself some. And even the Night Sisters were viewed as dark side witches, but never really got along with the Sith, and they viewed both sides of the Force as necessary. In fact, a lot of the ways that the Night Sisters talked about the Force actually had some weird parallels to Taoism. But for every example of the dark side not being inherently evil in expanded lore, you have another that says or would imply that it is. So this didn't help at all. Surprise, you thought that this was going to be a movie about the dark side? Well, it's also a video about how you should maintain the importance of canon. Canon is incredibly important because if you don't have a past, then you can't have a future. If there is no rules to base anything on, then anything goes, and it doesn't matter what happened previously. You can have all of your what if series, you can have all of your alternate realities and alternate universes, but if you haven't actually delegated what is what in the various canons and which canons relate relate to each one's, then these contradictions are going to start underplaying anything you're trying to say about anything. Oh, this character's using the dark side. Well, I don't know. Is that a bad thing? We haven't really established whether or not we're in a reality where that's bad yet. This character's lightsaber's red. Well, is it one of those worlds where the lightsaber changes based on whoever forged it? Or did he just happen to only have red crystals? Now, while I'm sure Disney has the money to have someone sift through all of the novels, find out where all of them lie, and determine what ones can or cannot work with each other, and draw more detailed lines into the alternate universes of Star Wars, both they and I agree that that would be a massive amount of time to pay someone to do something that isn't necessary at all. So they declared all of the novels legends, and I'm sorry, Star Wars fans, but that really was the best way to go about it, unless you wanted to risk them starting to draw arbitrary lines all over the place. But unfortunately, after this little tangent, we still don't actually have the answer to what we were talking about. Well, let's go back to the creator then. How did he see it? Well, he seemed to take a yin and yang approach. You know, necessary goods and evils. So good and evil, right? Case closed. Wrong, because that's not what it is. Yin and yang is not good and evil. You thought this was a video about the expanded canon inside a video about Star Wars? Ha! Joke's on you, sir. This is actually a video about commonly misrepresented things in media inside of a video about expanded canon, inside of a video about Star Wars, inside of a dream. Your family misses you. You've been asleep for years. Please wake up. Yin and yang is not good and evil. I mentioned Taoism earlier when I mentioned the dark side witches, the Night Sisters, because they viewed the Force as a necessary split focus. The Jedi, a lot of their problem came from their outward focus, their non-interventionism, their refusal to get directly in combat unless that was the will of the overarching power that they had so much faith in, because they very much focused outwardly, never inwardly, always about the world and the universe as a whole, not about the individuals there within. It was the whole over the individuals. It was detachment rather than attachment, which actually comes with a lack of empathy. If you're constantly thinking about the whole, then you're not thinking about the individual within it. Meanwhile, the dark side is all about inward focus, focusing on yourself, and somewhere between the two, you get empathy, where you focus on yourself and how you would feel in the position of another. The dark side is about amassing power and doing things for yourself, whereas the Jedi is about being part of the power and guiding the universe as a whole to where it needs to be, based on your very aetherish and broad definitions of what should be happening. If you ask the Jedi what their perfect world would be like, they'd probably give you some vague answer like all peaceful or eternally peaceful. The actual minutia of how to reach that, or indeed how anything would be enforced or run in detail in that, would not be something they talked about, because that's not something they focus on. The nitty-gritty was never something the Jedi were very good at. But yin and yang was never good and evil. It was never supposed to be. That's not how it works. If it was good and evil, then the evil could be taken away and everything would be fine. But yin and yang was always about balance. It was about inward focus and outward focus, the physical and the spiritual. If you get into Taoism, they refer to it as the male and female and needing both. Darkness and light are not good or evil. They simply are two states of being that are both required to balance the world out. And I'm sure we could go into a long, lengthy discussion as to the sheer amount of arrogance the Jedi had to have in their holier-than-thou council to interpret the term balance as the complete and total destruction of anyone using the polar opposite side than they are using. I have absolutely no idea how they heard that prophecy and interpreted it to mean what they did. So is the light side good? Is the dark side evil? Well, I don't fucking know, man. No one seems to. Lord knows George Lucas didn't, because he didn't actually have a plan in the first trilogy. And the first trilogy he had a plan in, and that was the prequel trilogy, he managed to completely screw up by fucking the dialogue under, over, and backwards. And then the sequel trilogy decided to go unplanned planned, and I'm pretty sure they're not involved in the canon at all because they don't seem to actually be checking any of it. They literally couldn't have been bothered to check where the actual power button on the lightsaber was, which is like the simplest thing you could have gotten right in that movie. This isn't just about them doing a lot of things wrong in that movie. It's about the fact that the simplest shit, the dumbest shit that no one really would have noticed, you still got wrong. Which is why I can't even take any of the sequel trilogy seriously as a part of the canon as to whether or not the dark side is actually evil. I know this video sounds like a massive waste of time, but this is part of why it's important. You can't just attach words like yin and yang to your story and say, this is what it is, therefore we will have good and evil. You have to know what yin and yang is. You have to know what that word you're using is, because otherwise if you use it wrong, you'll sound stupid. Avatar: The Last Airbender knew what yin and yang was. The moon and the ocean spirits. Neither one was evil, but they were both vital. They were push and pull. And you have to draw lines in your canon. You have to actually have a canon. I'll do a whole video on why canon is important, but trust me, there's a million reasons why it's important, and it will always boil down to the simple fact that if your story is to have any structure to it, it has to actually adhere to the things it did previously as it goes forward into the next part. Alternate universes are possibly the only way you can break canon without undermining everything else you've done. But I'd honestly love to pass the buck off to you people. Do you consider the dark side to be evil? What is your favorite example of the dark side being inherently corrupting and a terrible power? And what is your best example of something that means maybe it wasn't? An example of a medium that showed it not as an inherently evil thing, but just something that evil people tended towards. The dark side is about inward focus, so people who are self-absorbed or focused only on their own problems are more likely to tend towards that. Power that is based on that would be far more convenient for them. Like, share, follow, comment, subscribe. But if you don't want to have any fun insights or actually participate in the comments about the neat stuff, and you'd rather just complain about the fact that I came in with the question, is the dark side evil? And the whole video ended up boiling down to, we really don't fucking know. Feel free to also go down to the comments and, at the very least, be entertainingly angry. Lord fucking knows I was after spending hours of my life researching this and reading entire novels only to realize that I wasn't gonna get an actual fucking answer.